heard of this? You've heard of this, you absolute troglodyte! Jesus Christ! The tactical shooter series that's been going on since you were just a little twinkle in your dad's dreams of becoming an actor. Like me, you most likely have owned one of these games over the years, and you gave up playing it after the first room that you were dropped in because you realized it played more like you slowly navigating your way through the ticking time bomb of a conversation with your racist grandparents, rather than your Call of Duties, your Halos, your Battlefields, your Dooms, your Medal of Honors, your Wolfensteins, your Section 8 prejudices. Point is, these games are tactical shooters, which means you can't Steven Seagal it through the various rooms and corridors you'll be fighting terrorists in. Basic plot of these games is that you're a member of the highly respected anti-terrorism unit known as Team Rainbow. You're sent out on missions across the globe to take down terrorist threats and hopefully prevent them from ever happening. Rainbow Six has had a decent amount of games through the years, with most of them having a single-player campaign that's about as schlocky as you can get.
There is war in the Balkans, war in the Middle East, war in a dozen hotspots around the world. Outnumbered and under siege, Western democracies desperately struggle to keep the growing disorder from spilling across their
But the
borders.
series really hit a new level of popularity with the releases of Rainbow Six Vegas 1 and 2. Rainbow Six games have always been pretty strong sellers, with the first game, not counting expansions, generating over 8 million in that fiscal year. Rainbow Six 3 Raven Shield sold over 2 million copies by the end of 2004, and Rainbow Six Vegas 2 sold over 2 million copies within its first few weeks of release. So there's a market for tactical shooters, especially considering that Rainbow Six Siege, the latest entry in the series, and the subject of this video, has surpassed 45 million registered users as of February of 2019. With a decently sized esports league as well, I think it's safe to say Rainbow Six Siege was a hit. Siege didn't have the best start when it came out, to say the least. The game launched with a dearth of content, awful microtransactions, and the lack of a dedicated single-player mode. Most of these are still valid criticisms to this day, unfortunately. We'll get to that. The game was also already knee-deep in it prior to launch by advertising a $30 season pass. Players saw what also looked like a steep graphical downgrade and feature removal from the game as it was approaching a closed alpha. A decent amount of what was shown in the game's E3 revealed gameplay trailer was either heavily changed, downgraded, or removed entirely. Take the first minute and a half of the reveal, for example. The players start the match by observing the area through a flying drone camera, something entirely absent from the game, which, to be fair, with the way the game plays now, wouldn't entirely be useful. The player then drones through the house, seeing terrorists set up, and immediately there's a clear graphical disparity between this trailer and the release version. Look at that dynamic lighting as the helicopter passes the window, and from the ceiling lights in the house. This is nowhere to be found in the base game. Look at the dust that's thrown off the wall when the reinforcement punches through. Nothing in the base game. Look at the animation on the hostage as she begs for help and whispers into the drone. This is what the hostage looks like in the final version. And finally, see how they drop in from the helicopter? So cool, right? Can't do it in the base game. In fact, if you weren't playing ranked, you couldn't even choose where you wanted to spawn until a recent 2020 patch. The closest thing you can do now, I guess, is go to the roof of a building and rappel in from the rooftop windows. Sure. These graphical downgrades are kind of a running theme in Ubisoft's catalog, just like how Alien references and a fundamental misunderstanding on how to be funny is in mine. The lack of content was a big issue when Siege was released, as it only had 3 modes: multiplayer, situations, well, we'll talk about situations, and terrorist hunt. The multiplayer was obviously the star of the show here, as you could tell that Ubisoft poured all of their resources into it. There are 3 multiplayer modes. Quick Play, which just throws you into any random game. Unranked, which simulates ranked play, but does away with all of that fancy ranking system shit and toxicity. And Ranked, which is the fetid cesspool of the human race and can be used as the prime reason that God throws the world into oblivion when the shit they talked about in Revelations happens. Ranked is the Ravenholm from Half-Life 2. We do not go there anymore. Multiplayer hasn't changed much in the last 5 years and functions something like this. There's 2 teams, attackers and defenders. The attackers try to either kill all of the defenders, or complete an objective that is on one of the few predetermined sites scattered throughout the map. The defenders have to essentially kill all of the attackers, or successfully defend the objective by running out the clock. On launch, the game came with 11 maps and 3 multiplayer modes: Bomb, Secure Area, and Hostage. The game also launched with a mode called Terrorist Hunt, which functioned a lot like classic Rainbow Six games. One team of players is given an objective, and they have to fight their way through a platoon of terrorists in order to complete that objective. This can be played from both an attacker or defender perspective, but the game randomizes that choice for you. This mode isn't the most robust and gets stale pretty quickly, but it's a good place to try out new operators, the characters in Siege that you have unlocked. The final mode is called Situations. The lack of really any meaningful single-player content didn't go unnoticed by the fans as well. Rainbow Six games have always had multiplayer, but up until this point, Rainbow Six games always had decently robust single-player campaigns compared to Siege. The new entry into the series before Siege was supposed to be a new single-player game called Rainbow Six Patriots, and even had a few really cool trailers that came along with it before ultimately getting scrapped in favor of this game. Siege supplemented the lack of a single-player campaign with the addition of Situations. Situations are not good. They are glorified tutorial levels, with the only genuinely interesting thing about them being that Angela Bassett voices Rainbow Team's handler. I wish I had more to say, but that's it. The mode ranks you with 3 stars, and if you do well enough in all the maps and get all 30 stars, you get a whopping nothing with a side of go fuck yourself because you just wasted an hour and a half getting all 30 stars in Rainbow Six Siege's Situations mode. Ubisoft also made it readily apparent that most of the microtransactions would be limited to cosmetics and boosters. This was a problem for Siege on launch. You see, before Ubisoft finally got done spelunking its head in its ass, microtransactions weren't just limited to those 2 things. Allow me to break this down. There's 2 types of currency in Siege: Renown and R6 points. Both can be used to unlock operators, cosmetics, and at the time, attachments for your gun. Renown was earned for playing matches, but you would naturally accrue Renown at a snail's pace. However, you could buy R6 points with real money, allowing you to buy Renown boosters, which increase the amount of Renown earned at the end of matches. Meaning, you could buy a booster to get Renown faster so that you could get attachments faster. You could also buy operators with objectively better abilities faster, like Doc, who, at the time, was the only operator who could heal teammates. Unlocking operators with Renown was no easy task as well, as the price increased after every subsequent operator purchase. For instance, the first operator that you bought was 500 Renown, then the next was 1,000, then 2,000, and so on and so forth. So that, on top of the attachment prices, made grinding a massive part of the game. Herein lies the problem with microtransactions, arbitrarily splitting up the player base for people who pay to win. And in this case, they're paying for systems that give them an entirely unfair advantage. There's also a battle pass that comes out with every new operator, and while that's mostly harmless, there's some pretty dope skins in there that you can't get by just playing the game, which kind of sucks, and I guess is the point of the battle pass. Anyways, the game was also bogged down by a host of bugs and a really shitty netcode, which to Ubisoft's credit were mostly addressed through various patches and seasonal updates. So, not a good first impression to say the least, but I think it would be remiss of me not to say that Rainbow Six Siege has had one of the best turnarounds for a games as a service product in recent memory, and has quickly and unequivocally become my absolute favorite online competitive multiplayer shooter. Through steady patches, bug fixes, addressing netcode issues, free content in the form of maps, operators, seasonal events, some of which are getting their own spin-off games, and a general passion towards balancing, making attachments free, and listening to community feedback, the game has seen significant improvements in its now 5th year of support, with an apparent 10 more on the way. It's rare that you see a game get this much support over its lifetime. Naturally, there would already be a sequel to Siege, or at least the announcement of one. I mean, look at Destiny. That was supposed to be a 10-year experience, and Destiny 2 launched 3 years later. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look at how Siege is doing in 2020, and provide my usual criticisms and positive thoughts on how it all came together. Before I do that, I have to give a huge thanks to my boys over in the Siege group that I play with, the GPS. All the clips you're going to see in this video are either going to be from solo play sessions or sessions with them. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to provide context as to how an actual match would play out, so you won't be lost when I'm talking about mechanics later. A game mode is picked at random, and 2 teams of 5 are assigned to either attackers or defenders. Defenders are forced to defend a predetermined site, while the attackers get to choose a spawn location. Both teams then pick operators. Then the pre-round starts, where attackers pilot drones into the location and try to find the objective that they are supposed to secure, while defenders reinforce the location with metal reinforcement walls, barbed wire, pop-up shields, and operator-specific gadgets. As the timer runs out, the round starts, and the winner is determined by whichever team is eliminated first, if the attackers secure the objective, or the clock runs out. If you die as an attacker, you can spectate the other players on your team, or if there's another drone, you can look through it to identify enemies, but you can't move it. If you die as a defender, you can operate the cameras scattered around the map to help identify attackers' positions. These cameras can also be destroyed. The rounds are best out of 5, with 1 round for overtime should there be a draw. Not much has really changed when it comes to the presentation of Rainbow Six Siege. Aside from that significant graphical downgrade that I was talking about before, I think the game still looks pretty good as a whole. The game has some fantastic textures that sell the realistic and detailed environments that the maps take place in. Particle effects and decal details are also top tier, and give the destructive elements of the maps a sense of unpredictability and tension. However, I still think that the lighting across the board is pretty weak in comparison to that original gameplay teaser. Each of the maps have their own distinctive visual flair, and the variety is certainly rock solid. Speaking of the maps, the selection is nothing less than great here, with the exception of a few black sheep. As I said before, the map pool is great. Each of the launch maps have their own unique charm to them that make for a deep unpredictability with just how malleable they are. The map design is clever, creative, and makes full use of its highly detailed locale, like Plane, a very small, close quarters map that takes place on not Air Force One. Or how about duking it out in a small US embassy? Maybe slather on a little of that Russian cafe named after one of the most prolific and respected Russian authors in literature. Or even a house. Yeah. You like that? It's a it's a house. What I appreciate about the map design is that it always feels so true to life. Like these are actual lived-in places instead of labyrinthian mazes that require me to answer 3 questions backwards to move on to the next room, or else the guard sphinx will massage my sphincter with a Glock 19. There isn't a bad launch map, and I feel that each of these maps are elevated to the next level with what is arguably the selling point of the game: the destruction. If you've ever wanted to blow up a child's room without facing capital punishment, then Rainbow Six Siege is the game for you. Siege was lauded for its destructive and, to an extent, adaptive environments. Destructible walls and ceilings made for an incredibly tense experience, knowing that any part of the map can be destroyed to make a new entrance to the objective or hit a fat ang.
You see that?
Ooh, yeah, Alex. Oh my god,
that was a narrow angle.
That was good.
So good.
I can't tell you the amount of times that I was a defender and sitting on the point, and some fucking maverick flicks me through a hole in the wall the size of a butterfly's asshole. It's so infuriating, but never unfair. In my time playing the game, I never felt that the destruction led to BS deaths. It was always either due to bad placement on my part or good tactical positioning from the enemy team's part. You and your team can control how much you want to destroy, ranging from poking small holes in destructible walls in order to get a small view into a hallway, or destroying an entire wall to create a rotation point onto the other bomb site. In giving the player this much freedom to tear up the environment, Ubisoft have created a fine balance for both sides when it comes to how destruction works and how you can counter it. Siege is built around that player agency, which is the fundamental core of what makes its multiplayer such a joy to experience. Except if you're playing with an idiot teammate who gets brain blasted from behind because they camp at a position that's completely exposing their back to an open goddamn doorway. It's moments like that where I'm just like,
"What's wrong with you, man? You're slipping. What, you can't check your 6?
Going back to making holes in the wall to cover a hallway, you as a defender can get a better angle, but the attacker can shoot you through the wall. As a defender, you get reinforcements to cover up these destructible walls, but the attackers have hard breachers that have gadgets and equipment that can destroy reinforcements. As an attacker, you can blow up roof and upper floor hatches to get the high ground on defenders on the objective. As a defender, you can reinforce these hatches so that attackers can't break through them. However, if the attackers have hard breachers, they can break through the hatches, but that leaves them exposed to a headshot as there isn't any cover when peeking over the hatch. There's a fine balance when it comes down to how you can approach really any situation that the defenders and attackers are faced with. Every situation in the game is tied to the destruction in a pretty ingenious way, and Jesus Christ, that was loud. The best thing about the game is the sound. Shut up. Alright, listen. Shut the hell up. Listen to this. Come here. Shut the door. Come here. Listen to this. You're not going to sit there and tell me that the sound of a rifle with the suppressor firing hitting its target from 2 meters away isn't the most satisfying sound in the world. You're not going to tell me. No, you are not going to tell me. It's my show, and hey, you son of a... This is my... This game's sound is the tits. Every single decibel of sound can be felt and is mixed to absolute perfection. Every single gun sounds like a fucking explosion going off in the room, and depending on which room you're in, it'll have some nice reverb on it. Can't overstate how amazing the weapons sound in this game. Some of the most satisfying gunshots ever put into a video game. Just listen to this semi-auto rifle with a suppressor on it. Everything in Siege's world is weighty, clunky, and true to life. Reload! I mean, just listen to how your operator moves. Listen to the fucking boulders they're dragging around for feet. The clanking of belts and straps hitting your weapon and body as you lumber towards the building the objective is in. Listen to the sound of the wood breaking on the barricades you punch and slash away at with your knife. Listen to the muffled sounds of those boulder feet sprinting on the floor above you as the shrill beeping of the bomb entices a tense and heart-pounding reaction. I love the screeching sounds of the metal reinforcements scraping up against walls and blowing holes into the back of them. I love the sound of Mira's black mirror exploding the back of a wall out and shooting the discarded drywall across the room behind it. I love the reloading sounds. I love the sounds of Tachanka's grenade launcher flinging grenades around corner like nobody's business. Point is, the Foley work and sound mixing in this game is the best you're gonna get on the market, aesthetically, and for use in gameplay. You can use the sound of the enemy operator's footsteps and gunshot distance to gauge where they are. Now, granted, that's been in games like forever, but what sets it apart is just how well mixed it is. You can hear these footsteps over the 14 trillion other little sounds creeping in from the back of the mix. The sounds of your team fortifying walls and hatches, the ambient sounds of the map, whether it be some cheesy butt rock song playing over a jukebox, to the air conditioners in an elevator shaft, the distant sounds of bullets whizzing past barricades and destroying cameras, the sounds of your friends running past you as well. Sound doesn't discriminate. You have to decide whether that's your teammate or a Callie who's gonna make cream of tomato soup of your brain in about a second and a half. It's mind-boggling just how well the sound design turned out in this game. Frankly, I'd be disappointed, and wouldn't even recommend the game if it didn't have this level of polish over it. Sound is the peanut butter to the gameplay's jelly in tactical shooters. Shit, sound is important to games as a whole, which really goes without saying. But with tactical shooters, where every single second can mean the split moment between life and death, you die in like 3 shots in this game. So knowing the positioning of your enemy in this game so you can rotate to a more tactically advantageous spot is essential to winning a game. Or you can just camp in a doorway and hit a fat fucking ang, brother. Hell yeah! Let's talk about the operators. The last thing I want to talk about is the operators. The men and women of Rainbow Six Siege are the core foundation of the game. Operators are essentially the heroes, champions, legends, etc. of Rainbow Six Siege. They're the characters that you're controlling, and each have their own unique abilities, most of which are really cool and inventive. Wamai is an operator that can plant a sort of gravity well trap that can suck in enemy grenades and detonate them at a safe distance. Caviera is a pure stealth operator whose silent steps ability completely silences her footsteps, making her the ultimate roaming operator and perfect for those stealth kills and interrogations. Ace can throw mini detonator charges called Selmas and obliterate enemy reinforcements, making for some great long-range angles and for catching defenders off guard. Dokkaebi is a sniper operator that can hack enemy phones, causing them to vibrate, revealing their position through the use of sound. She can also steal an enemy phone when they die, giving her and the team access to enemy cameras. I'm not going to go through every operator in the game as there's 58 of them, but my overall opinion on the selection given to us is pretty positive. However, I feel like there's some operators that are just not as viable as others, like Bandit for instance. One of the better operators in the game with an excellent kit containing an MP7, one of the best SMGs in the game, and a battery-powered shock trap that puts an electric field around a wall, preventing attackers from blowing through it. However, they only cover one wall at a time. Now, with the release of Kaid, his gadget immediately outperforms Bandit's. Kaid has an electro jaw, which does the same thing as Bandit's gadget does, but it covers multiple walls, therefore kind of completely invalidating Bandit's usefulness. There are other operators that suffer from this as well, like Vigil and Nock. Vigil's ability lets him become completely invisible to cameras for a short period of time, making him completely undetectable on any camera or drone. However, Nock has the same ability, but hers is a mix with Caviera's, where her footsteps are completely muffled. Granted, one's an attacker and one's a defender, but there's a clear balancing disparity between the two operators that have the same gadget. Then there's operators who are completely useless, like Warden. Warden's ability lets you see through smoke and reduce incoming flashbang blindness by using his super special glasses. However, the only way these buffs work is if he stays completely immobile, which is fine if you're camping on point, but leaves you completely open to enemy fire if they have you pinned down and you need to move to a different location. There are obviously some operators that are more useful than others when it comes to map selection, map placement, team composition, and general effectiveness, but overall, aside from these complaints, I have a pretty positive opinion on the operator selection, as I've mentioned before. I love the uniqueness and individuality of most of the operators, and even the ones with the same gadgets have loadouts that more than make up for their similarities. They actually, at the time of the release of this video, just dropped one of the best additions to the game in the form of Aruni, which I feel is a perfect representation of the creativity and mechanical prowess the Siege team can bring to the game. Aruni was a detective in the RTP and was a flawless shot caller, dismantling human trafficking rings and bomb plots like Cooper loves the Tibetan method. However, her career almost came to an end when she lost both her arm and leg when on assignment. She was treated with prosthetics that allowed her to get back into the field, and eventually, Team Rainbow. I'm totally abridging all of this for time, by the way, but every operator has a detailed backstory with facts and trivia and interviews with other operators talking about said operator. It's insane. These feel like real people with lives, ambitions, and personalities. You could also completely ignore this stuff if you want to, and that's fine too, because their gadgets do the real talking about these people. Which brings me back to Aruni. Her abilities and backstory are seamlessly woven into the gameplay, and that's what I can't praise the Siege team for enough. I mentioned before that Aruni has prosthetics. She can now use her prosthetic arm to bash open massive holes in walls and create viewpoints or completely knock down a wall to create a rotation point, completely eliminating the need for explosives. Her gadget is a Surya laser gate, which prevents operators from entering rooms unless they throw something through it, like an explosive. Which is kind of ingenious given Aruni's situation as to how she lost her arm and leg. It's not just Aruni. Every operator's gadget is tied to their backstory in an interesting and inventive way. Like how Glaz, one of the sniper operators, loves to paint and appreciates the precision and detail that goes into every stroke. Specifically the details surrounding colors, and how they look when they're out of place. Hence why his gadget is a scope that highlights enemy operators in bright yellow, while the rest of the environment through the scope is a nice muted red. It's the striving for a homogeneous picture that makes Glaz want to make sure that his picture stays red, eliminating any pesky out-of-place colors. As I've mentioned before, every operator has backstories like this that directly tie into their gadget. The only one that doesn't is God. God actually got a rework, the first one for any operator in the game thus far. Maps have been reworked for years now in the game, because it's really hard to design new maps apparently. Our Lord and Savior, believe it or not, was the most useless operator in the game before the rework, with his gadget being a stationary turret he could pick up and place anywhere. The turret had a shield that would prevent headshots, but your little toesy woesies were in for a nice bullet pedicure. So on top of being completely immobile, really put Jehovah, down a few levels on the tier list. However, the Siege team really leaned into the meme a little and decided that they didn't want a dog shit operator anymore, so the only logical thing to do was to actually give him fucking godlike powers in the form of super strength, because now, of course, he can carry his fucking turret around as his primary weapon. Sure, his gadget is now an incendiary grenade launcher in case you felt like putting on a high school production of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Instead, this time, God is a fat Russian drunk who thinks he's a Def Jam comic. Tachanka has been the only operator with a full-blown rework at this point, and by that I mean one that fundamentally changes the way the character plays. Other operators have had changes made to their gadgets and kit, famously the Jaeger ACOG scandal, but no other operator has undergone a heavy facelift quite like this before. It's really cool to see, and I definitely welcome more of it in the future. Rainbow Six Siege is that wine in the cabinet that just gets better with age. It's very, very rare to see a game with a rocky start ever really come back from its initial disappointing launch, and Siege managed to do it. Multiple esports leagues and teams, over 45 million players registered, regular content drops that are all free aside from cosmetics, and great communication with the fanbase are just some of the reasons why Siege went from being maligned to being amazing. It truly is a unique game that really places the emphasis on teamwork. It's not your standard Call of Duty affair where you can just run in and hope for the best. You and your team really need to think about where you're going, what operators you're bringing, and the best way to approach a situation. If the 10 more years of content thing really happens, then this game is in for a long, fruitful life on the market. If this is how they plan to keep on supporting the game. Like I said before, this is unequivocally my favorite online competitive shooter. Getting together with the boys a couple of times a week and just having a laugh with them while we get stomped on or do the stomping is always one of the highlights of my week. Can I get real for a second on here? Can I get real for... Can I get real for a second? Is that allowed? I'm gonna do it. All right. I was playing this game alone for a really long time, and it wasn't the worst per se, but there was definitely a lack of, friends. None of my friends owned the game, and that was understandable because it's definitely not for everybody. But then my buddy Eamon introduced me to some friends of his, and they all had Siege, so we all started playing together, and it finally felt like I was playing the game the way it was supposed to be played. It felt like, for the first time, I was having fun. Eventually, we all grew closer, both in the sense of playing as a team and as friends. It was at this time I was also going through a pretty rough breakup, and at the same time, I was being brought into this new group of friends that have been nothing short of amazing and accommodating. I lost something really dear to me, but gained something even better. So, I guess you could say Siege has sort of a sentimentality in my life. One that, when I look back on it, is filled with like 3 years of just idling by, playing the game, and having a time, I guess, to now when I truly feel like I've cultivated genuine friendships while using Siege as a jumping off point, and just having plain old fun with the game and my friends. I want to give a big thank you again to the GPS for letting me use their voices and recordings for our sessions in the game. The video would literally not exist if it wasn't for you guys, so, thank you. Really. Let me know in the comments if you have any stories similar to mine about games, movies, anything like that. Or let me know what operators you play and why you like them. This video was a real labor of love to make and was the reason that I haven't dropped in a few months. I have a bunch of really cool projects lined up and I'm planning on sticking to that schedule that I mentioned in the last Shake It Baby video, which was 1 to 2 big video essays a month and 2 Shake It Babies a month as well. I also have my top lists coming out as well from music, movies, and games for last year, so that'll be done soonish. I've run into a little bit of trouble with that because I don't have a way of recording footage on consoles, as I do have a couple of console games that I do want to mention in my Games of the Year list. But expect the movie and music ones first. Those are much easier to make. Obviously, the games ones I have to, reinstall all the games, get the footage, and blah blah blah, but that shouldn't be too bad, so expect that in the coming months. I also have some really interesting music videos that I am working on currently in the writing process of. I really have to start limiting myself because I am writing like 6 different things at once, and I am going insane trying to do it, so I have to learn to balance my time better. But one of my New Year's resolutions was to spend more time working on these videos, and I do have a lot of content planned in the future, so I have the next few months covered, which is great, and I'm really excited to share all that I have with you guys. I'm putting my all into this, and I could not be more grateful that I have somewhat of an audience, so I'm super, super thankful for that. yeah, not to get real, even though I got real for these past like few minutes. I'm gonna stop talking now. Anyways, Happy New Year. Thank you again for sticking with me and being patient while I work on these things, because they do take a long time to make. It's just me doing this, nobody else. I'm the editor, producer, whatever, everything, writer. So it takes a lot to do, and I am trying my best to meet deadlines that I set for myself. But yeah, I hope everybody is staying safe and had a wonderful New Year and holiday. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.